This is my true story. For 8 years, I worked as a servant in my son's house, sleeping in his basement and scrubbing his toilets. He gave me a room after I lost everything to bankruptcy and became homeless. But the room was a storage space, and he made me earn my keep by cooking and cleaning and doing yard work like hired help. His wife handed me a list of chores every morning, and they called me the helper in front of guests. But one day my son saw me on TV and his life collapsed. You won't believe what happened next. Before I tell you what happened, tell us where you are watching from and subscribe. I lost everything in a business collapse when my son was in college studying to become an engineer. I had owned a small manufacturing company that made parts for automobiles, and for years the business had done well enough to support my family comfortably. We lived in a nice house and drove decent cars, and I paid for my son's college tuition without him needing to take out loans. I was proud of what I had built, and I thought I was securing a good future for both of us. But then the economy crashed and my biggest clients went bankrupt and stopped paying their bills. I tried everything to save the business, but nothing worked. I took out loans to keep paying my employees, and I mortgaged our house to cover operating costs. I worked 20-hour days trying to find new clients and cut expenses and keep the company afloat. But the debt kept piling up faster than I could manage it. Within 2 years, I had to declare bankruptcy and close the business. The bank foreclosed on our house and repossessed our cars. I lost everything I had spent decades building, and I was left with nothing but debt and shame. My son was in his final year of college when this happened, and I did not want to burden him with my problems. I told him the business had some difficulties, but I downplayed how bad things really were. I did not want him to worry or feel like he needed to drop out of school to help me. I wanted him to finish his degree and start his career without being dragged down by my failures. So I lied and said everything was fine while I moved into a cheap motel and tried to figure out how to survive. After my son graduated, he got a good job at an engineering firm, and within a few years he was making excellent money. He bought a big house in an expensive neighborhood and married a woman from a wealthy family. He started living a lifestyle that I could only dream about. Meanwhile, I was spiraling deeper into poverty, working minimum wage jobs and barely affording rent in terrible apartments. I was too ashamed to tell him how bad things had gotten because I did not want him to see me as a failure. I lost my apartment when I could not pay rent for 3 months in a row. I ended up sleeping in my car and then in homeless shelters when the weather got too cold. I was 70 years old and homeless and broken, and I felt like I had hit rock bottom. I had once been a successful business owner with a nice house, and now I was standing in line at soup kitchens and sleeping on cots in shelters surrounded by people who had also lost everything. My son found out I was homeless when someone he knew saw me at a shelter and recognized me. He called me sounding shocked and angry and asked why I had not told him things were so bad. I said I was ashamed and did not want to burden him. He said I was his father and I should have asked for help. He offered to let me stay at his house, and I broke down crying with relief. I thought he was rescuing me out of love and concern. I thought he was giving me a chance to rebuild my dignity and maybe even my relationship with him. He picked me up from the shelter and drove me to his mansion. I stared at the huge house with its perfect lawn and expensive cars in the driveway, and I felt grateful that my son had done so well for himself. I thought maybe living with him would give me time to get back on my feet and find a job and eventually move out on my own again. I thought he was offering me temporary help during the worst crisis of my life. I had no idea that he was not rescuing me out of love, but out of a desire for cheap labor. I had no idea that the next 8 years would be the most humiliating years of my life, and that my own son would treat me worse than a stranger. The room my son gave me was not actually a room, but a converted storage space in the basement of his house. It had concrete walls and a concrete floor, and a single bare light bulb hanging from the ceiling. There was a cheap cot with a thin mattress and a blanket that smelled like mildew. There was a small plastic dresser with 3 drawers for my clothes, and nothing else. No carpet, and no heat, and no window. The basement was cold and damp and smelled like mold. I could hear the furnace and the water heater rumbling all night, and I could hear footsteps on the floor above me every time someone walked around upstairs. The first morning I woke up in that basement, his wife knocked on the door and came in without waiting for me to answer. She handed me a piece of paper with a list of chores written in neat handwriting. She said, "This is what we need you to do every day to earn your keep." I looked at the list and saw it included cooking all the meals and cleaning all the bathrooms and doing all the laundry and mowing the lawn and washing their cars and taking out the trash and vacuuming and dusting and anything else they needed done around the house. I asked her if she was serious, and she said completely serious. She said they were providing me with a place to live for free and food to eat, and that was more than most people would do for someone in my situation. She said I needed to contribute to the household and make myself useful. She said if I did not like the arrangement, I was welcome to leave and go back to the shelter. I felt my stomach drop because I realized I had no choice. I had nowhere else to go, and no money and no options. So I nodded and said I would do the chores. My son came down to the basement later that morning and said we needed to have a talk about expectations. He said I was living in his house for free, and that meant I needed to earn my keep like everyone else. He said his wife worked hard to manage the household, and she should not have to do all the cooking and cleaning when there was someone available to help. He said I should be grateful they were willing to take me in, and that the least I could do was make their lives easier. His tone was cold and businesslike, like he was talking to an employee, not his father. I tried to explain that I was looking for a job, and that once I found work, I could pay rent and contribute financially. He said that was fine, but until that happened, I needed to do the chores on the list. He said his wife would inspect my work every day, and if anything was not done to her standards, I would have to redo it. He said if I did not keep up with the chores, they would have to reconsider whether I could continue living there. The threat was clear, and I understood that my housing depended on my performance as their servant. I started doing the chores that same day. I cooked breakfast for my son and his wife and their 2 children, and I served it to them at the dining room table. Then I cleaned up the kitchen while they ate. I spent the rest of the morning cleaning bathrooms and doing laundry and vacuuming. I made lunch and served it and cleaned up again. In the afternoon, I mowed the lawn and washed their cars. Then I started preparing dinner, which had to be ready at exactly 6 o'clock when my son got home from work. I quickly realized this was not temporary help during a difficult time. This was my new life. I was not a father living with his son. I was an unpaid servant living in a basement and working all day to earn the right to sleep on a cot and eat leftovers. My son and his wife treated me like hired help, not like family. They gave me orders and criticized my work and made me feel like I was lucky to be there. I became their servant, not their father, and the shame of it crushed me a little more every single day. For 8 brutal years, I lived in that basement and worked as their servant, doing every task they demanded. I woke up at 5:30 every morning to start cooking breakfast before anyone else was awake. I made eggs and bacon and pancakes and fresh coffee, and I had everything ready and hot when my son and his family came downstairs at 7. I served them their food and poured their drinks, and stood in the kitchen waiting in case they needed anything else. Then I ate whatever was left over, standing at the counter, because I was not allowed to sit at the table with them. After breakfast, I cleaned the kitchen and started laundry, and then I cleaned all 4 bathrooms in the house. My son's wife would come inspect my work and run her finger along surfaces looking for dust or water spots. If she found anything, she would make me redo the entire bathroom. She treated me like incompetent help who needed constant supervision. She never said please or thank you. She just pointed out what was wrong and walked away, expecting me to fix it immediately. I spent my days scrubbing their toilets and washing their floors and doing their laundry and cooking their meals. I mowed their lawn in the summer and shoveled their driveway in the winter. I washed their expensive cars every week and made sure they were spotless. I took out their trash and cleaned their gutters and did any repair work that needed doing around the house. I worked from early morning until late at night with barely any breaks. My back ached constantly, and my hands were raw from cleaning chemicals, and my knees hurt from kneeling to scrub floors. They called me the help in front of their guests at dinner parties and gatherings. I would serve food and drinks to their friends and colleagues while wearing an apron, and they would introduce me as the man who takes care of the house. They never said I was family. They never said I was the grandfather of their children. Their guests would thank me politely the way you thank a waiter or a servant, and I would nod and go back to the kitchen feeling humiliated and invisible. My son's children grew up not knowing I was their grandfather. They thought I was just the old man who cleaned their rooms and did chores around the house. They called me by my first name, not Grandpa. They spoke to me the way children speak to hired help, polite but distant. I wanted so badly to tell them who I really was, but my son had made it clear that I was not to talk about our relationship. He said it would confuse the children and that it was better if they just thought of me as someone who worked for the family. I was made to eat leftovers in the kitchen alone after everyone else had finished their meals. I was not allowed to eat with the family even when it was just the four of them. My son said it was inappropriate for the help to eat at the family table. So I would stand in the kitchen listening to them laugh and talk in the dining room, and then after they were done, I would eat whatever scraps were left on cold plates. Sometimes there was barely anything left, and I went to bed hungry. I slept in that cold basement on that terrible cot for 8 years. I had no privacy because my son or his wife would come down at any time to give me new tasks or check on something. I had no personal space and no dignity. I owned almost nothing because I had no money to buy anything. I wore clothes my son gave me that he did not want anymore. I used toiletries and supplies that were leftover or unwanted. I lived like a homeless person except I had a roof over my head, and that roof belonged to my son, who reminded me constantly that I should be grateful. Every single day, I felt the shame of my situation crushing me. I had once been a successful business owner, and now I was scrubbing toilets for my own son. I had raised him and paid for his education and given him opportunities, and this was how he repaid me. He treated me like garbage, and his wife treated me even worse, and I had no escape because I had nowhere else to go. Every week, I would save coins from the change my son and his wife left scattered around the house. They would empty their pockets on the kitchen counter or on their dresser and leave nickels and dimes and quarters sitting there. They never counted it or missed it because to them it was just pocket change that meant nothing. But to me, every coin represented a tiny piece of hope and a chance at something better. I would collect the coins when I was cleaning, and I would hide them in a sock I kept tucked under my cot in the basement. I did this for months until I had saved enough to buy a lottery ticket. Every Wednesday, I would walk 2 miles to the corner store to buy a single ticket with my saved coins. The walk took almost an hour each way because my legs were old and my knees hurt and I had to rest several times along the route. But I made the walk every week, no matter what the weather was like, because buying that lottery ticket was the only thing in my life that gave me hope. It was the only thing that made me feel like maybe someday I could escape the hell I was living in. The store clerk got to know me over time, and he would smile when I came in and ask how I was doing. I would tell him I was fine, even though I was not fine at all. He probably thought I was just a lonely old man with nothing better to do than walk to the store and buy lottery tickets. He had no idea I was living in a basement and working as a servant for my own son. I never told anyone about my situation because I was too ashamed to admit how low I had fallen. I never won anything for the first 3 years I played. Every week I would check my numbers, and every week I would lose. But I kept playing because it was the only dream I had left. I would imagine what I would do if I won. I would imagine buying my own place and living with dignity again. I would imagine never having to scrub another toilet or wash another dish or listen to my son's wife criticize my work. I would imagine being free. My son and his wife never knew I was buying lottery tickets because I hid it from them. If they had found out, they probably would have mocked me or told me I was wasting money that could be spent on something useful for the household. They controlled every aspect of my life, and I knew they would not approve of me spending coins on lottery tickets. So I kept it secret, and I made my weekly walk to the store, and I bought my ticket, and I checked my numbers, and I dreamed of escape. The coins I collected were the only things I owned that truly belonged to me. Everything else in my life was controlled by my son and his wife. They decided when I woke up and what I ate and what chores I did and when I went to sleep. But the coins I found were mine, and the lottery tickets I bought were mine, and the hope I carried was mine. Nobody could take that away from me, no matter how badly they treated me. Some weeks I did not have enough coins to buy a ticket, and I would have to wait until the following week. Those were the hardest weeks because it meant another 7 days of servitude without even the small hope of a lottery ticket. But I was patient, and I kept collecting coins, and I kept making my walk to the store every Wednesday that I could. I told myself that someday my luck would change, and I would win, and everything would be different. I never told my son where I went on those Wednesday walks. If he asked, I would say I was going for exercise or to get fresh air. He did not care enough to question me further. As long as I did my chores and stayed out of his way, he did not pay attention to what I did with my small amounts of free time. So I kept my secret and I kept my hope alive, one lottery ticket at a time. It was a Wednesday night, and I was in the kitchen cleaning up after one of my son's dinner parties. They had invited clients from his firm and their spouses, and I had spent the entire day cooking and preparing food and setting up the dining room. I had served them dinner and refilled their drinks and cleared their plates and brought out dessert. Now they were all in the living room drinking wine and laughing while I scrubbed grease from pans and loaded the dishwasher. My back was aching and my feet were sore, and I was exhausted from being on my feet all day. I could hear the television in the living room playing in the background while they talked. The lottery drawing was on because it aired every Wednesday at 9 o'clock. I usually did not pay attention to it because I was always busy with chores. But that night, something made me stop and listen. I heard the announcer start reading the winning numbers, and my heart started beating faster. I pulled the lottery ticket from my pocket where I always kept it, and I looked at the numbers I had chosen. The first number matched. I told myself it was just a coincidence and that it did not mean anything. The second number matched. I felt my hands start to shake. The third number matched. I set down the pan I was washing and focused completely on the television in the other room. The fourth number matched. I could barely breathe. The fifth number matched. My vision started to blur. The sixth number matched perfectly. All 6 numbers were mine. I had won the lottery. I checked the ticket 3 times to make sure I was not making a mistake. I looked at each number carefully and compared it to what I had heard on the television. There was no mistake. I had won. I pulled out my phone and looked up the lottery website and confirmed that the jackpot that week was $4 million. $4 million. I was holding a ticket worth $4 million while wearing my son's old shirt that he had given me because he did not want it anymore. I was standing in his kitchen scrubbing his dirty pans while holding a ticket that would change my entire life. I felt like I could not breathe and my legs felt weak and I had to grab the counter to steady myself. I looked at the ticket again to make absolutely sure this was real. It was real. After 3 years of buying lottery tickets with coins I saved from their pocket change, I had finally won. I had won enough money to escape this basement and this servitude and this humiliation. I had won my freedom. I quickly put the ticket back in my pocket and tried to calm down and act normal. I did not want anyone to notice that something was wrong. I went back to washing the pans with shaking hands while my mind raced with thoughts of what this meant. I could leave. I could walk out of this house tomorrow and never come back. I could buy my own place and live with dignity. I could tell my son exactly what I thought of him and his wife and the way they had treated me for 8 years. But I did not say anything that night. I kept the secret to myself while I finished cleaning the kitchen. I went down to my basement room and lay on my cot staring at the ceiling, unable to sleep. I kept pulling out the ticket and looking at it to make sure it was real. I thought about all the ways my life was about to change. I thought about the look on my son's face when he found out. I thought about walking out of this house for the last time and never looking back. I knew I had to go to the lottery office to claim my prize and that there would be paperwork and verification and probably media attention because the jackpot was so large. I knew my son would find out eventually. But for that one night, the secret was mine alone, and I savored it. For the first time in 8 years, I fell asleep feeling something other than shame and despair. I felt hope and power and the sweet anticipation of justice. The Lottery Commission called me 2 days after I submitted my winning ticket for verification. They said I needed to come to their office for an official award ceremony because any prize over $1 million required a public presentation. They said it was part of the lottery rules and that the ceremony would be televised and broadcast live during the evening news. I asked if there was any way to claim the prize privately, but they said no, the rules were clear and non-negotiable. Winners of large jackpots had to participate in the public ceremony. I felt nervous about the ceremony because I knew once it was broadcast, my son would find out. But I also felt a strange excitement about it because I wanted him to see me on that stage holding the check. I wanted him to realize that the servant he had kept in his basement for 8 years was now a millionaire. I wanted to see the shock on his face when he understood that everything had changed. So I agreed to do the ceremony and scheduled it for the following week. I needed decent clothes for the ceremony because I could not appear on television wearing my son's hand-me-down shirts and worn-out pants. I took some of the small amount of money the lottery commission had advanced me for immediate expenses, and I went to a thrift store. I bought a clean button-down shirt and a pair of slacks and shoes that were not falling apart. I got a haircut at a cheap barber shop and tried to make myself look presentable. When I looked in the mirror, I barely recognized myself because I had not seen myself dressed nicely in 8 years. The day of the ceremony, I left my son's house early in the morning, telling his wife I had an appointment. She did not ask what kind of appointment because she did not care what I did as long as I finished my chores. I took the bus to the lottery commission office downtown and waited in a room with other winners and lottery officials. I felt out of place surrounded by people in expensive suits and dresses, but I tried to hold my head up and remember that I belonged there just as much as anyone else. When it was my turn, they called me up to a small stage they had set up with cameras and lights. A woman from the lottery commission stood next to me, holding an oversized ceremonial check made out for $4 million. Photographers started taking pictures, and reporters started asking me questions about how I felt and what I planned to do with the money. I answered as simply as I could, saying I was grateful and that the money would change my life. I did not mention that I had been living as a servant in my son's basement because I did not want that to be the story. The ceremony lasted about 20 minutes, and then it was over. The lottery officials explained that the actual money would be transferred to my bank account within a few days after taxes were withheld. They gave me paperwork and contact information for financial advisors. They told me to be careful about people trying to take advantage of me now that I was wealthy. I thanked them and left feeling like I was walking on air. I had done it. I had claimed my prize, and now I just had to wait for my son to see the broadcast. The ceremony aired that same evening during the 6 o'clock news on the local station. I knew my son would be home from work by then and that he usually had the television on during dinner. I knew there was a good chance he would see it, or that someone he knew would see it and tell him. I went back to his house and went down to my basement room and waited. I did not have to wait long. I was folding laundry that his wife had left for me when I heard my son's voice upstairs scream, "What the hell?" His voice was so loud it echoed through the entire house. I heard his footsteps pounding down the stairs toward the basement. My heart started racing, but I stayed calm. This was the moment I had been waiting for. My son burst through the basement door so violently it slammed against the wall. His face was red and twisted with shock and rage and disbelief. He was holding his phone in his hand with the screen showing a news article about lottery winners. He shoved the phone in my face and screamed, "What the hell is this?" I looked at the screen and saw a picture of myself from the award ceremony holding the oversized check. The headline said, "Local man wins $4 million jackpot." I looked back at my son calmly and said, "Yes, that is me." He stared at me like I had just told him I was an alien from another planet. He said, "You won $4 million, and his voice was shaking. I said, "Yes, I won $4 million. He said, "When did this happen, and why did you not tell us?" I said, "It happened a few days ago, and I did not tell you because it was none of your business." His face went even redder, and I could see a vein throbbing in his forehead. He said, "None of my business. You are living in my house, eating my food, and you won $4 million and did not think to mention it." His wife appeared behind him in the doorway. She must have heard him yelling and come to see what was happening. When she saw the phone screen, her eyes went wide and her mouth dropped open. She looked at me standing there in my old clothes surrounded by piles of their dirty laundry, and she could not seem to process what she was seeing. She said, "Is that really you?" And I said, "Yes, it is really me." She said, $4 million, and I nodded. My son kept asking questions rapid fire without waiting for answers. "How long have you been playing the lottery? Where did you get money to buy tickets? How many tickets have you bought? Why did you keep this secret? What are you planning to do with the money?" I just stood there and let him rant because I was enjoying watching him lose control. This was the same man who had made me scrub his toilets for 8 years. This was the same man who called me the help in front of his guests. Now he was standing in front of me panicking because the servant had become a millionaire. His wife recovered from her shock faster than he did. She suddenly smiled at me in a way she had never smiled before. Her whole face changed from the cold, contemptuous expression I was used to seeing to something warm and friendly. She said, "Oh my goodness, congratulations, this is such wonderful news." Her voice was sweet and fake, and I could see exactly what was happening in her mind. She was calculating how much of my money she could get access to. My son seemed to realize he needed to change his approach too. He took a deep breath and tried to calm himself down. He said, "Dad, this is amazing news, and I am so happy for you." It was the first time he had called me Dad in 8 years. For 8 years, I had been the help or the old man, or just my first name. Now suddenly, I was Dad again, because I had money. The hypocrisy of it made me sick. His wife said, "You must be so overwhelmed with all of this, and you should definitely stay here where we can help you manage everything." She said there are so many people who will try to take advantage of lottery winners, and you need family around you to protect you. My son nodded eagerly and said, "Absolutely, you should stay here, Dad, and we will take care of everything." He said, "We can help you invest the money and make good decisions, and make sure nobody scams you." I looked at both of them standing there with their fake smiles and their transparent desperation. 8 years of cruelty and humiliation had evaporated in an instant the moment they found out I had money. They thought they could just flip a switch and pretend the past 8 years had not happened. They thought I was stupid enough to fall for their sudden affection. But I had been planning for this moment since the night I won, and I knew exactly what I was going to say. Within minutes, their cruelty transformed into desperate warmth and fake concern that made me want to vomit. My son put his hand on my shoulder in a gesture that was supposed to look fatherly, but felt awkward and forced. He said, "Dad, we need to sit down and talk about this properly and make a plan for how to handle your winnings." His wife nodded enthusiastically and said, "Yes. Let's all go upstairs to the living room where we can be comfortable." I noticed she said living room, not basement. Suddenly I was worthy of sitting in the nice part of the house. They both tried to usher me toward the stairs, but I did not move. I stood there in the middle of the basement, surrounded by their dirty laundry, and looked at them calmly. My son said, "Come on, Dad, let's go upstairs," and his wife said, "I will make us some tea, and we can discuss everything." I said, "I am fine right here, and we can talk here." They both looked uncomfortable standing in the basement, like they suddenly realized how terrible it was that they had made me live there for 8 years. My son started talking about how I should definitely continue living with them, because moving would be stressful and unnecessary. He said this was my home, and I was family, and there was no reason to go anywhere else. His wife jumped in and said, "We have plenty of space, and you are welcome to stay as long as you want." I almost laughed because they had made it very clear for 8 years that I was only welcome as long as I earned my keep by doing their chores. Now suddenly I was welcome unconditionally because I had $4 million. His wife said we should talk about managing your money because lottery winners often make poor financial decisions and lose everything. She said her family had experience with investments and wealth management, and she would be happy to introduce me to her financial advisor. She said we could set up accounts and make sure the money was protected and growing. My son added that he knew people in banking and investing, and that between the two of them, they could make sure I was taken care of properly. I understood exactly what they were proposing. They wanted to take control of my money and manage it for me. They wanted access to my accounts and decision-making power over my investments. They were positioning themselves as my protectors and advisors when really they just wanted to get their hands on my $4 million. They thought I was too old and too stupid to see through their transparent scheme. My son said, "You have been through so much, Dad, and you deserve to relax and enjoy this money without worrying about the details." He said that is what family is for, to help each other and support each other during important times. I wanted to ask him where that family support had been for the past 8 years, when I was scrubbing his toilets and sleeping on a cot in his basement. I wanted to ask him why he suddenly cared about me now that I had money when he had treated me like garbage when I had nothing. His wife said, "We love you, and we want to make sure you are taken care of." She said, "This house is your home, and we are your family, and we will always be here for you." She kept smiling that fake smile, and I could see the calculation behind her eyes. She was already spending my money in her mind. She was already planning what she could buy, and how much she could take, and how she could benefit from my winnings. They scrambled to rewrite history right in front of me. They acted like the past 8 years of servitude had been love and generosity. They acted like they had rescued me out of kindness and housed me out of compassion. They acted like I should be grateful to them instead of the other way around. They pretended that making me sleep in a basement and calling me the help and treating me like a servant had all been normal family dynamics. The audacity of it was breathtaking, and I felt rage building inside me that I had been suppressing for 8 years. I looked at both of them calmly and let the silence stretch out until it became uncomfortable. They stopped talking and waited for me to respond to all their offers of help and family support. My son was still trying to smile, but I could see anxiety creeping into his expression. His wife's fake warmth was starting to crack around the edges. I took a deep breath and said, "I am moving out tomorrow, and you will never see a penny of this money." The words came out clear and firm and final. My son's face collapsed like I had slapped him. He said, "What do you mean you are moving out?" I said exactly what it sounds like. I am leaving this house tomorrow and I am never coming back. His wife said, "But this is your home and we want to help you." I said, "This has never been my home. It has been my prison." I said, "For 8 years, you treated me like garbage in your basement while I scrubbed your floors and washed your dishes and did every humiliating task you could think of. I said I was your father, not your servant, but you made me earn my keep like I was hired help. I said you called me the help in front of your guests and made me eat leftovers alone in the kitchen and never let me sit at your table. I said you made your children think I was just some old man who worked for you instead of their grandfather. I said you took everything from me, including my dignity, and now you expect me to share my money with you because suddenly I am family again." My son started to protest and said we gave you a place to live when you had nowhere else to go. I said you gave me a storage room in your basement and made me work every day to earn the right to sleep on a cot. I said you could have helped me get back on my feet, or helped me find a job, or treated me with basic human respect. Instead, you turned me into your personal servant and worked me like a slave for 8 years. His wife tried to interrupt, but I held up my hand and kept talking. I said, you looked at your own father, who had raised you and paid for your education and given you every opportunity, and you decided I was worthless because I lost my business. I said you were ashamed of me and you hid me in your basement and used me for free labor. I said every time you made me scrub your toilet or wash your car or serve your guests, I felt a piece of my soul die. But I had nowhere else to go, so I stayed and I endured it, and I saved coins from your pocket change and bought lottery tickets because that was the only hope I had left. I said now I have $4 million and I do not need you anymore. I said I am going to buy my own house and live with dignity for whatever years I have left. I said you can scrub your own toilets and cook your own meals and wash your own floors from now on. My son's face had gone white and his wife's face had turned red. She said, you are being ridiculous and ungrateful after everything we did for you. I said you did nothing for me except use me and humiliate me for 8 years. My son said we can work this out and we can fix our relationship. I said there is no relationship to fix because you destroyed it when you decided I was worth more as a servant than as a father. I said you made your choice 8 years ago and now I am making mine. His wife suddenly turned vicious and said we will sue you and take you to court and get what we are owed. I said you are owed nothing and I have paid no rent and signed no contracts and I owe you nothing but contempt. I said I am leaving tomorrow morning and I suggest you stay out of my way. I said if you try to stop me or harass me or make any claims on my money, I will tell everyone how you treated me for 8 years. I said, I will tell your friends and your colleagues and your clients that you kept your father in your basement as a servant while you lived in luxury upstairs. The threat landed, and I could see fear replace anger in both their faces. I moved out the next morning while my son and his wife were both at work. I packed my few belongings in the plastic dresser drawers and called a taxi to take me to a hotel. I left the keys to the basement door on the kitchen counter along with a note that said, "Thank you for 8 years of servitude. I will never forget what you did to me." I walked out of that house without looking back, and I felt lighter than I had felt in almost a decade. The basement prison was behind me, and freedom was ahead. Within 2 weeks, I bought a beautiful home in a quiet neighborhood far away from my son's city. It was a modest 3-bedroom house with a yard and a garage and everything I needed. It was not a mansion, but it was mine, and nobody could take it from me or make me earn the right to live there. I furnished it simply but comfortably, and for the first time in 8 years, I had my own bedroom with a real bed and my own bathroom that I did not have to share or clean for someone else. I donated a significant portion of my winnings to shelters and programs that helped struggling elderly people who had nowhere to go. I gave money to organizations that provided housing and job training and support for seniors who had fallen on hard times. I knew what it felt like to be homeless and desperate, and I wanted to help others who were in the same situation I had been in. Every dollar I gave away felt like justice for all the years I spent being treated like I did not matter. I set up college funds for my grandchildren with the money going directly to them when they turned 18. I made sure my son and his wife would have no control over those funds. I met with my grandchildren properly for the first time and explained that I was their grandfather, not just the old man who used to clean their house. They were confused at first, but eventually they understood. We started building a relationship that their father had denied us for 8 years, and I got to be a real grandfather to them. My son called me constantly for months after I left. He sent emails and text messages and voicemails apologizing and begging me to reconsider. He said he was sorry for how he treated me and that he wanted another chance to be a better son. He said his wife was sorry too, and they both regretted their behavior. But his voice only reminded me of the years he stole from me and the dignity he stripped away. I blocked his number and deleted his emails without reading them. He tried to visit my new house once, but I called the police and had him removed from my property. He tried to contact me through my other relatives, but I told them I did not want any communication with him. He tried to use his children to guilt me into talking to him, but I told the children gently that their father and I had issues that could not be fixed. Eventually, he seemed to give up and the calls and messages stopped. I heard through family that he and his wife had to hire actual help to do the chores I used to do, and they were bitter about paying for services I had provided for free. I am 78 years old now, and I have been living in my own home for several years. I spend my days reading and gardening and volunteering and enjoying my freedom. I have friends and hobbies and dignity. I visit my grandchildren and take them places and build memories with them. I sleep in a comfortable bed in a warm room, and I eat at my own table. I worked as a servant in my son's house for 8 years, sleeping in his basement and scrubbing his toilets. Then he saw me on television winning $4 million, and suddenly, I was dad again. But it was 8 years too late, and some damage cannot be undone. I am finally free and wealthy and done serving people who never loved me.